So you've seen Bridgerton, and you're like, I want more of this. Well, depending on what you want more of, I have a few recommendations for you. Hello, my lovely friends, it's Margaret. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am going to be talking about books that I think you will like if you enjoyed this most recent season of Bridgerton. If you want one for the first season, I can rewatch that and make up a list of that as well, but like I'm specifically focusing on the most recent one, and they're still in the, they're in the frame. Again, this isn't just like me going, hey, hi, here's my book, and if you like Bridgerton, you'll like this because it is also a book. No, that's not it. I sat down and I actually picked a couple of things that I think appeal the most to me about this most recent season. And then I went and I chose books based on those few things. Every single one of them has to do with romance because for once, I just get to recommend romance things. Yay! This is the opposite of my 5 Reasons Why series where I'm telling you 5 reasons why you should read the book that are not the romance. This is here's books that I like the romance, and this is read them. The first category that we are going to be talking about is basically just like Regency romance books. There are a lot of historical romances, a lot of different time periods, but if you specifically like that period, or if you know it well, you just kind of like the aesthetic of it, I do have some romances to recommend to you. The first recommendation I have is obviously going to be the OG Regency romance queen, Jane Austen. I have several different recommendations here because I think these specifically speak to things that happen in this season of Bridgerton. Some of you maybe even have been trying to get into Jane Austen, but you're not sure where to start, and let me say, it doesn't matter where you start. I'm going to kind of give you, if you have been wanting to read Jane Austen and you haven't gotten into it yet, or you're not, maybe you tried one and you might want to try again. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, but basically there are like 3 different books here that I think, based on Bridgerton, kind of connect and you may enjoy. Pride and Prejudice is definitely going to be for those that liked the banter between Anthony and Kate and like the sexual tension. And definitely because of when Jane Austen is writing, like that tension is not so much there in this book. This is very much more about Elizabeth and the Bennet family, but we do have just like the way her and Darcy's relationship grows. I did, you appreciate it. I enjoy it. This is about Elizabeth, and she is the second sister of 5, and her mother is obsessed with getting them married, and she ends up at odds with this dude named Fitzwilliam Darcy. And it's no wonder he is a grump because his first name is Fitzwilliam. If you liked kind of the sparks, the antagonism between Anthony and Kate, start here if you're wanting to get into Jane Austen. If you are someone who really, really liked the family aspects and the relationship between the 2 sisters, I would start with Sense and Sensibility by Jane. These are all by Jane Austen, Margaret. Start with Sense and Sensibility. This is about Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood. Mostly it follows Eleanor, who is the eldest, and her family has just been kicked off of their father's estate because he had in his first marriage, he did have a son, and so they are all girls in the second marriage. They are not inheriting anything, and so they take their inheritance is small, basically, and they're getting kicked out of their home because their older half-brother's wife doesn't like any of them. And so it follows Eleanor, and she's trying to kind of take care of her family and make sure that they are okay, because they do have an income. It's a very modest income, so they're having to live in a very different kind of way. So you have Eleanor, she's much more sensible, she's much more like, okay, this is what needs to happen. And then you have Marianne, who is a little bit more like romantic, she's a little bit younger, and she doesn't have to kind of bear the burden as much. And it's just, basically, it's about their relationship. They do both end up having sort of love interests, but I really like this. This and Pride and Prejudice are tied for my favorite Jane Austen, primarily because I just identify with Eleanor Dashwood. Then coming in third for my favorite Jane Austen, it's Persuasion. This is for if you were really into the just slow build of Anthony and Kate's relationship and how long it took us to finally get somewhere. If that slow burn is what is working for you, I would pick up Persuasion. This is about Aunt Elliot, and she, when she was younger, was engaged to a young seaman named Frederick Wentworth, and then her family didn't like that match, and so because everyone that was, kind of in a position to counsel her and the fact that he wasn't going to be making a lot. It's like, she just basically was like, I don't know that this is a situation that's going to be good for both of us, and she called the engagement off. They were engaged for like 5 minutes, and then she called it off because she's like, I don't, you know what, I didn't think about this. However, he is now a captain, and he's done very well, robbing privateers, or being a privateer, or whatever. He's done very well in whatever war was going on at this point. So basically, it is about her having to deal with her feelings because she really, really likes him, but she's watching him try, keyword being try, to court someone else, because it's been several years since they've seen each other. It's complicated, it's messy, but it is just about her kind of having to deal with this situation, and her going like, you know what, I can be a grown-up about this. It's fine. I can be a grown-up about this. Does that sound familiar? Now, if you thought I was just going to recommend a Jane Austen, you were wrong. I do have a couple of other things that you might enjoy. First is To Have and to Hoax by Martha Waters. This is a historical romance, emphasis on the romance. It's about two people, I don't remember what their names are, Violet and James. And they get married at the beginning of the book, very reminiscent of Bridgerton season 1, where they're kind of caught in a compromising situation, only in this case it's just they're on a dark balcony together, and her mother walks in on them having a conversation. They're just talking. That is all that's happening. And she's like, oh, you must be married. Luckily for that whole situation, they did hit it off, and so they end up pretty happy for like the first year of their marriage. And then something happens, and they haven't really been speaking for the last 4 years. That's the prologue. And then we pick up 5 years from the prologue, where James has had an accident, and he doesn't tell her that he was in this accident, that he could have died, but he's fine. Like, he doesn't tell her any of that. She finds out from one of his friends, and so she's really mad about this because she's his wife, and she's like, you don't think about how this might affect me? And so she fakes an illness to get back at him and give him a taste of how she feels, and they just kind of end up in this war of just trying to pretend that this is what's really happening. They would rather escalate this fake illness than, like, put aside their pride and have a conversation about the original kind of rift between them. It is hilarious. I thought this was so well done. I really enjoyed kind of how the original, like, kind of thing that gets between them. I thought that it was a really, like, not relatable, but like a reasonable kind of thing. Like, it's big enough that definitely it's going to cause some drama, but also it is not one of those things that is like, oh, someone did something completely unforgivable. It's just like, this thing happened, you both ended up hurt, and you haven't gotten past the fact that you're hurt enough to be like, you know what, maybe I should have a conversation with my spouse about this thing. I really appreciated it, that's what she did, and it wasn't one of those things that you're like, really, you're taking him back after that? So much fun. I read it in like mostly a day. Like, I dropped my everything I was supposed to do that evening to finish this book. Listen, I make choices. They're not always wise choices, but they are choices. The next one I want to recommend is The Other Bennet Sister by Janice Hadlow. This is a pretty decent book. It follows specifically Mary Bennet, and it follows kind of her journey through this. It gives us a little bit about what's going on during Pride and Prejudice, but it also is very much following her after the events of that, and different things that happen to affect her, and her kind of coming into her own person and figuring out what she wants her life to look like. I really enjoyed it. I appreciated it. There were a couple of things that, like, it did that I wasn't particularly, like, happy with, being the fan of Pride and Prejudice that I am. And there were things that I really wished we could have gotten out of the story, but all in all, I thought it was a really solid story, and I really liked how it took a lot of the tropes Jane Austen used, along with these characters of Jane Austen's, and they kind of married them together to make this story for Mary. The other one is for my people who like to see kind of remixes of popular stories, and that is Pride and Premeditation by... I don't own this yet, but I want to. And I am very bad. I'm very bad at remembering author names. Tears of Price. So this is a we're gonna say remix. It's not a like, it is a retelling, but it's also not, because what Tears of Price has done is she has taken the characters from Pride and Prejudice and she's put them in London. Elizabeth, instead of being like the daughter of a landed gentleman, she is the daughter of a solicitor, and she likes kind of helping her dad's I don't even know what they would call it back, but like his practice, she likes helping them kind of, because they would have to gather their own evidence and all of that at this point in time in history. And she likes helping gather that evidence, and then she ends up in direct conflict when Bingley gets accused of murder. She ends up in direct conflict with another solicitor's office, which is owned by, it's Darcy and Sons. And so it's just about them trying to prove Bingley innocent, and also not fall in love with each other. I really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to the second one, and it's just so fun the way that she took these characters and she basically she gave us, like, she gave us what we wanted. She gave us the thing that those of us, like the people that like 2005 Pride and Prejudice, like that tension, she gives that to you, like really amps it up for you. Much more than like in the original novel. I thought it was fun. I thought it was clever. I liked the take that it had and the stuff that it highlights in Regency society. So highly enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. If you liked the way that like Kate and Anthony were kind of at each other's throats at the beginning of this series or season, then you are going to like these books because there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of sparks that fly, there is a lot of just confrontation in these books. So the first one is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and a Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai. And the way that this actually goes is Roma and Juliet they fell in love as teens. Their parents kind of found out about this and so stepped in and separated them so that they would not be able to continue on or run away or whatever it was they were planning on doing as children. And so now there is this thing that is affecting the people of Shanghai. They're going crazy and like people are like literally clawing out their throats. Body horror, very heavy in this one. If you don't like being grossed out, maybe don't read this one. But they're having to work together to figure out what is going on. There are some pacing issues. I will warn you right out the bat. I think that there is a lot in this that felt like filler. However, I really appreciated how Chloe Gong took the original, took Romeo and Juliet and translated it into a more modern setting, into a completely different like country and culture than Shakespeare would have used, like Shakespeare's. And I really did appreciate like the relationship between Roma and Juliet, where they're like, I hate you, but I also am still attracted to you, and there are all these memories, and like, but I hate you, but I also memories, and just the angst and the conflict within themselves with knowing like they are on opposite sides of these gangs. They are the heirs of these two opposite gangs, and they should not be, as want to be with each other as much as they do, and yet they're still there like, but I was in love with you once, and it's so good. I enjoyed it so much. The peak, the like just epitome, the best hate, like revenge hate to love that you will ever see cross your... I'm really building this up, and there are a lot of people that don't like this book, but I absolutely adore it, and I love the relationship, all of that, but I cannot do a hate to love romantic tension. We shouldn't want to bone, but we do. I can't recommend those kinds of books without recommending The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is a retelling of the myth of Scheherazade, and in this one, Scheherazade is volunteering to be part of the Sultan's harem because the last bride he killed was her best friend, and she wants revenge. And so she comes in with this plan to eventually kill him, and then she gets there and she finds out that things are not entirely as there are things that she did not know about what's going on with this situation, and the romantic tension in this book. There's a scene in this that just like had me on the floor. It's just I'm not talking hot and steamy. I mean like it is the most like romantic thing that anyone can say. I'm sorry, I can't like tell you because it's spoilery, but like it's one of my favorite things that has ever happened in a book ever, and you're just like basking in the glory of this moment that you have been building to for nearly the entire book, okay? Like, it's that kind of slow burn. We also have, on the other hand, Khalid, who is the Sultan, and he is in a situation, and that is all I'm going to say about it. Like, this was an iffy one when I started it, even though I don't know why I like the Scheherazade story as much as I do, but I do like it. But it is so good, and you will want the second book when you are done with this one. Another one that I have to recommend is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is not a historical fantasy, but it feels like historical fantasy. It's about Elizabeth, and she works in one of the great libraries, and her like dream is to be one of the librarians in these massive libraries that protect these books called grimoires, and they're basically books that have been magicked and will turn into monsters if they are not cared for properly, if certain things happen to them, etc., etc. And so they end up in these libraries so that people will not end up like dead. However, some stuff happens. She ends up getting accused of a crime. She ends up on the run and runs into, oh God, what's his name? Nathaniel? Is it Nathaniel? Yeah, Nathaniel. He is a wizard, a sorcerer, something. He works with magic, and she's been taught to distrust people who work with magic. So she distrusts him for a great deal of this book, both him and his servant Silas. But she ends up having to work with him to clear her name, and I love it. It's so good, and I really liked the way that without completely recreating the Victorian era, she still was able to kind of tackle how women were treated in the Victorian era when they tried to go against the common narrative. Going from historical to something that's more sci-fi, let's talk about Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is a superhero world where basically you had these villains, the villains got taken down by the heroes, and you have two characters who are dealing with the fallout of that. You have Adrian, who is the son of what's basically like Superman and Batman. He's their son. And then you also have Nova, who is the niece of like the head honcho of the villains, who Adrian, the son's fathers, killed. All of this happened like a decade ago when Nova was a child, but she's wanted revenge ever since the night her parents were killed, and she blames Adrian's parents for them being killed and her having to be taken in by her uncle and her sister dying and all of this other stuff. So she decides that she is going to join one of these superhero teams. This sounds unhinged because I don't remember the names for half of this stuff, but like in this world, like there are tryouts and you can join a superhero team. So she decides she's going to go into these tryouts, join one of the superhero teams, and she's going to take this down from the inside. Adrian ends up impressed by how she is able to use her powers, and so he decides that he wants her on his team. And then it's this whole thing where they're trying to, I don't even remember what they are trying to figure out, but like it's basically, oh yeah, that's right, because Adrian is also, what they're trying to figure out is that there is also this like rogue superhero that is going around, and nobody knows it's Adrian. And so I'm pretty sure this is in the flap, because you know this from like the beginning of Adrian's. Like he is secretly moonlighting as a superhero with different powers than the ones he has, because he's had a way to create powers for himself. I'm rambling, I'm sorry. Long story short, they end up like going on missions, and kind of she ends up having to deal with his team, and she starts to realize, Nova does, that maybe she should be questioning some of the things that she was told by the people who raised her, the villain group that kind of took her in after her uncle died. At the same time, Adrian starts kind of like realizing that maybe his parents are not as perfect as he thinks they are. It's just really fun to watch Nova go from like, I think you are the scum of the earth and I want to murder you, to like, oh no, this boy. It's one of my favorite ways things can go in books. I should probably have thrown the Cruel Prince trilogy in here, but I didn't. But like, if you haven't read it yet, Cruel Prince is also a very good hate to love, I hate you, I want to murder you too, oh no, this boy. The final category is quite possibly one of my favorite tropes. It's quite often paired with hate to love, and that is like the kind of will they won't they / slow burn trope, which you can kind of have that will they won't they without it being slow burn, but quite often they're one and the same. The first one that I want to recommend is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Fazel. I love this series. It is so stressful, but I love it. I was very stressed during the final book, like so stressed. Like having to pause the book and breathe, stressed. Because I am who I am, and I have the priorities that I have, which is romance. This is about Zafira and Nasir, and they come from very different backgrounds. Zafira has grown up kind of like doing what she can to help her village survive. She is known as the Hunter of Demenhun. She goes out and hunts in this magical forest called the Ars to feed her people and her family. Most people cannot go into this forest because they will lose their minds. they'll go crazy. But she is able to go into this forest and not be affected by it. And so she ends up getting recruited by someone else to go to the island of Shah so that she can help find this book that will bring magic back to Arawia, which is her land where they live. We also have Nasir, who is known as the Prince of Death. He is an assassin. He is also the heir to the throne, so why we thought that was a good idea, I don't know, but he reluctantly carries out his father's bidding when his father needs someone killed, and his father decides that he wants the book and he needs Zafira killed to claim it. And it goes from there. They end up meeting on this island and having to go searching for this book. This is also a really good one if you like found family. If you like found family, there is a found family in here that just does justice to the trope. Like, so many of the side characters are just wonderful. Like, the ones that aren't the evil big bad. Like, just Hafsa Fazel did such a good job creating not only our two main characters, but the characters that flesh out the entire story. I highly recommend this. I love it. I do have a review coming out for this book. I believe if this goes up on time, it will be out tomorrow. So just please check it out. Please. Another one of my like favorite slow burns. If you want something that's going to be a slow burn, but it's going not a series, it's standalone, you just got to read one book, The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. So this is about it's about a boy and a girl, but their entire lives are kind of spent preparing for what's known as the Scorpio Races. So every November there is this race where people, well actually no, it starts before then. So there are these things called the Kapal Ishka. They are water horses that sometimes come on land and eat people. So some dudes decided that it would be really fun to start this race where, like, when the Kapal Ishka come on the shore, you capture one and then you start training it, and you have this race in November, and whoever can get to the finish line without getting eaten by their horse wins. We have Sean, who is trying to basically just stay with his horse Core, who is one of the Kapal Ishka, and then we have Puck, who is riding in this race on an island pony, and she's trying to save her farm, and they end up like meeting and trading together and building a relationship. You know, going into this, like, you know when they meet that there's a spark there, and like, you know they're gonna be a thing, and yet they're so very obtuse about it. I love it. I highly recommend this. I love the writing in this. I'm also was a former horse girl, so like that was my middle school phase and my high school phase, kind of also my kindergarten phase, like my elementary school phase. Like I was really into horses for a very long time, but I love it. I've reread it several times, and the ending is one of those few endings that really got me and almost had me crying and in tears. I just love it so much. If you are new to the channel, you may not know this, but I don't cry, like, really at all over fictional things. So if you have something that's got me tearing up and I'm wishing I did cry, then you have done something phenomenal. The next recommendation that I have is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. Okay, it's been a while since I read this, so let me see if I can remember. So it's about a girl that ends up forced into a marriage that like neither she nor her family really, like, well, some of her family wants her in it, like other parts of her family does not want it, but basically she has to go off to this religious place married to one of the priests, and he's not particularly excited about it either, but people found out about a specific type of magic that she had, which somehow helps her interact with the sandstorms, and by her interacting with those sandstorms, she's calming them down, making it less likely that they happen, I believe. And so, like, they want to harness that magic, and by binding her to one of the priests, does some stuff, and there's some other stuff that's going on. Watching the relationship between the two of them build, and the way he's just so good about the situation, more book boys like that, please. I absolutely loved the world building in this series. I thought it was just so well done. I thought the way that the relationship between the two of them was crafted was really good. And like, you kind of get the kind of mentorship also, like, because he's trying to teach her what they need her to do in order to harness the magic the way that they want the two of them to harness the magic. And so, like, you're just watching them kind of both be in this situation that they don't like, but also finding comfort in each other and this friendship that's building between them, and also the feelings that are building between them. And I love it so much. If you couldn't tell, it was a very good book. left a mark on my soul, and I don't know why I haven't read the second book yet. So the next one is one that I want more people to read, and that is Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. This is about, oh my god, what are their names? Yelena? I don't remember it because it's not Vidanric. Oh my god, why am I not recommending Crown Duel to you guys? Crown Duel is another, like, real... Holy moly, she wrote, like, a whole page about her husband. Does this tell you... It doesn't tell you what his name is, but this is about Yelena, and she is on, like, death row in this land called Ixia. It's kind of like it's like a dictatorship almost, very military, and she's on death's door, and she gets pulled, not death's door, she's on death row for a crime that she has committed, and she gets pulled from death row by the king's poisoner, because, or not the king, the commander's poisoner, because the commander's last taste tester has died, and so he is training the person, like the captain of his guard, his master poisoner, something. He's basically in charge of, like, most of the king's military stuff, like, or the commander's military stuff, like, his right hand, basically. So the commander's right hand, whose name I cannot remember at this point, he pulls her off, and is like, okay, I'm going to train you. You have a choice. You can either be killed on death row, or you can maybe prolong your life by being the taste tester for, the commander. And so he starts training her in different poisons and how to recognize them and various other things that she needs to know in order to do her job. She also starts kind of discovering that she has this latent magic, and in her world, like, or in Ixia, magic is, like, banned. It is outlawed. Because I don't want that, I'm not going to spoil that, but, like, there are reasons, and I really liked the reasons. It was very interesting. But, so, they end up kind of, like, she's 18 and he is very young for his position, so, like, they're very close in age, so it's not weird like that, but they do end up kind of striking up a relationship, and there's definitely some sexual tension between them, and them being like, feelings, and dealing with that until, you know, some stuff hits the fan and everything comes to the surface. And then you have 3 more books of them just being ridiculous. It's great. I love their relationship, and I love the way that, like, they are not dependent on each other in this series. Like they still very much, like, want to be with each other, but it's one of those things that, like, she is not afraid of going off on her own. In fact, has to go off on her own, and they're not, like, dependent about, like, being in each other's proximity. They can function separately, and it's just, I like them. I love the series. And please read it and come talk to me about it. Alright, and then my final one is kind of newer, but I really enjoyed the build between the two, and I can't remember whether there is even a kiss in this book. It's just them kind of slowly realizing they have feelings, and that is Nocturna by Maya Motain. This is about Finn. Oh my god, what's his name? Finn and Alfie. Alfie is a prince. His brother has recently died, and he's been trying to find a way to bring his brother back, because the way his brother died was, like, it's like a weird way, and it makes more sense once you know, but it's also kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to get into it. But then we also have Finn. She has face-changing magic, and she is a thief, and so she gets hired to steal something from the royal family. Alfie finds her. He tries to stop her. Some other stuff happens, and then a crisis happens because of the other stuff that has happened, or Alfie's reaction to the, and so now they are having to kind of go after this really, like, dark magic that has been released as a result of actions, and they have to work together to get this done. It was so good. The way that things kept feeding into each other, the way that their relationship was, it doesn't have a huge cast, but I really did like the characters, like the characters that we spend time with were really, like, fun to spend time with, and I think that they had really interesting impacts on the stories, and I just really liked Alfie and Finn kind of, like, going through this adventure, kind of being, like, buddy pals, and, like, but also getting to the end of it and going, oh, it's one of those things, like, neither of them realize what their feelings are until, like, the very end of the book, and it's part of a trilogy. So those are my recommendations for if you liked depending on what you liked about the romance in season 2 of Bridgerton. If you have recommendations, please let me know in the comments, because I am always looking for new slow burn romances. Several of my favorite tropes are right in here for several of my favorite things that can happen in those So please let me know. If you are not feeling chatty and you want to let me know that you watched to the end of the video, go ahead and leave me a B emoji. If you know, you know. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and check out some of these over here. I'll have a recommendations video up here, and then whatever is newest on my channel down here. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye!